Hi everyone, welcome to the show. Just a quick note before I start. You are listening to the free stream. I'm also releasing a version on the Substack, which you can find a link in the description. And the paid version is just slightly longer, maybe 10 minutes or something. And it's just got some content in there that probably would have gotten me in trouble on certain platforms. So I'm just moving it over there. So check it out.
Welcome, everyone, to the Granite Mountain Movie Club. I'm your host. I go by Granite. Today is a very special episode. We'll be talking about Napoleon Dynamite, a movie that is beloved by many, especially in my generation. I'll say our generation. Me and my guests, I think, are all kind of in the same cohort. This episode is extra special because I'm releasing this on the 20th anniversary of Napoleon Dynamite's theatrical debut, June 11th, 2004. Joining me today are Degree Studies.
Hey, how's it going?
And Cool Frazier.
Cool and listening.
And now before we jump into the movie itself, I need to shill something real quick. A couple days ago, I launched the Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream, which is available only on Substack. Now, this is where I post premium content, episodes about things that maybe aren't necessarily movies, maybe more general culture items. Might even get into some politics. And maybe there'll be some content that wouldn't necessarily fly on YouTube, maybe some more controversial or politically incorrect stuff. And today's episode will have like a bonus portion that'll only be available on the Substack. And we'll get to that later. But the Substack, $5 a month, which is the lowest Substack will allow me to charge. They don't allow me to go lower. But if you do the yearly option, I made it $30 a year, which is, $2.50 a month. That's about as cheap as I thought I could make it, and still
still live in the manner that you're accustomed.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair price. I don't think I'm not aware of any Substacks that are, I definitely don't subscribe to any that are cheaper than that. So that's like the price of what? One restaurant quesadilla at like a sit down place. So it's pretty fair, I think. And you guys can vouch for the Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream, right? I think you guys are familiar with the content over there.
Yeah, the things that Cool Frazier said he was going to reveal in that section are truly shocking. So I think I think people should sign up just to hear that.
I was even shocked that they allow it on Substack.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Substack. Patreon has like this history of like blocking and cutting off and canceling people who are like, right wing of Bernie Sanders, but to the right of Bernie Sanders. But Substack, they've kind of made it their mission to like just let people enjoy things.
Can I comment on the Premium XL Sigma stream? I think I got that right. Maybe not. I felt like half of the initial episode was you just like apologizing for making it.
I was shooting for I was kind of just trying to explain my motivations and thoughts, but say more.
Just I was like, Granite, let's pay you. Let's give you some money. We're all on board.
Well, I agree with that.
We all want to give you money, and finally now we can.
Yeah, that's true. You make a good podcast. I wanted to ask also, I don't want to reveal whether I'm a beta or an alpha. Maybe the audience can decide, but can I subscribe if I'm not a Sigma?
Yeah. The idea is to help you become a Sigma.
Oh, okay.
If that's a direction you want to go.
Well, that sort of puts some of the things that Cool Frazier said about, women and PUA and red pill, like that's all in context now. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you heard it here from these guys that there's this pent up demand to pay me, and I will no longer stand in the way.
Yeah, you're responding to market forces.
Yeah. I mean, some people said they were going to commit self harm if I didn't let them. So, gonna let them do it. All right, so tell me, guys, about your history with Napoleon Dynamite. When did you see it? Where were you? What was it like?
I heard about it pretty early on, and ended up seeing it in theaters probably the week it released. And I mean, I don't know if we want to get into this, but I think there was a lot of hype around it before it came out because it kind of like was a big hit at Sundance. And then like there was all this hype like, oh, there's this new movie that everybody has to see. And it kind of like, I feel like there was kind of a grassroots push to see the movie because I think it like, I think if I remember correctly, it was kind of released somewhat limited at first, but then it kind of like expanded out more as it was like more popular.
Yeah, and what was your initial reaction?
Oh, I thought it was great. And I mean, we've talked about it before on this podcast, but like for millennials, quoting movies was like the coolest thing you could do. And every group of friends had a movie quoter who was just the best at quoting movies, right? And you'd kind of quote movies to each other. And this was like one of the top quotable movies of the early 2000s. Like everybody, you had to know all the references. You had to know about the Tots and the Tina and Rex Kwon Do. You know what I mean?
Roughly where in the country were you? And like how was it received in your part of the country?
I was in Arizona.
Okay.
And well, I mean, I like I said, I thought I didn't know we were going to talk about this so soon because this is one of my 4 takes on this movie. So take number 1, I felt like this was one of the first. Like I was trying to think back, but this was like one of the first like indie movies for teens, if that makes sense. Like, it was a movie that was like very indie, it was Fox Searchlight A24 style type thing, very like Wes Anderson, but it wasn't rated R, and it was MTV was involved somehow. I don't know all the details on it, right? But yeah, but so like it was kind of pushed to the teens at the time. And so like this was a movie that was like for teens, but wasn't like a teen movie. It was like an indie kind of art house movie. And I don't even know if we've had that since. I don't know if you guys can think of any movies that are similarly placed.
Yeah, I thought about that, and we can jump into that a little later. But degree studies, what when did you see it? And you were in like New England, right? Like how did it go down there?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that I was not aware of this movie. Like I would have been graduating high school when it came out, and I think I was not aware of it in theaters, or perhaps it wasn't in theaters around me. And then when I got to college in California, whenever, I don't know at what point in that year it was released on video, but it was immediately like a big movie in the rotation at college, and I think I saw it then. And yeah, to me, like we can get into like the sort of Mormon connection with the movie later. But for me, what was really interesting about it is it was so clearly about a different part of the country, just sort of the way, the way I think it's in Idaho, I believe, and sort of like the way the town is presented, and there's so much open space. Like it was a cozy movie about a small town, but not in the New England way that I was used to. So that was interesting about it. And I just remember thinking the tone was totally unique. I didn't really, we talked about this a little bit before the record, but I remember being mystified that such a wholesome movie could be so funny. And I didn't know anything, any context for why they'd chosen to make a movie like that. But I thought it was sort of sweet and, but still had, some really big laugh out loud moments. And I definitely had the movie quoting experience. I think at college, I can remember at least like 5 instances of a man in front of his friends loudly saying to a woman, "I cooked you a delicious bass," and then them just staring at him, and then us all laughing. So like it had a big, it definitely had a sort of indelible impact. And then actually, it was what's the Jack Black movie that they did after this?
Nacho Libre.
Yeah, because Nacho Libre was like the bigger movie of the two in my college friend group, but I think our our enjoyment of Napoleon Dynamite is what led to our interest in Nacho Libre. So yeah, that was definitely experienced it on video or whatever, but it was immediately like a pretty huge and influential cultural artifact.
Yeah. So I had kind of I'm really into movies, but I've never been like, guest list, red carpet, early access, premiere, stuff like that. But since this was at Sundance, they had this program as part of, and I was a local to Salt Lake, so they had this program where Sundance movies would get played after the festival for like Utah locals. And so this was like the one to go see. Like this was a very in demand, both because it had done really well at Sundance and because it had so many like local connections. And somehow I ended up getting into one of the early screenings, like, not at Sundance, but just like this extra thing. So that felt cool to like be part of this like special thing. And I go to see it, and one thing that was a little weird, because we had seen some of the marketing going into it, and that's why like Jared Hess picked Fox Searchlight, because they had a good track. He had 8 different offers out of Sundance for who to like to buy the rights and distribute it, or however that works. And he picked Fox Searchlight because they had a track record of successfully marketing smaller indie films. And so we had seen a bunch of the marketing. We kind of knew what to expect. Like I already knew that I kind of already knew that I'd like it. I'm like, this is a thing about like my sort of friend group. Like we already embraced, this was kind of, in the water or in the air at the time. Like we already embraced this sort of like weird, like, oh, we're dorks, we wear stupid clothes, that sort of stuff. Like we were kind of already like, oh, this is kind of a movie like about us. And it wasn't quite, but I remember there was like a self-consciousness with the group of people I went to see it with, a bunch of like guys who were, into like thrift store clothing and stuff like that. And I remember some people like laughing way too hard. And I was very suspicious. I'm like, this is funny, but I don't really believe you guys. Like I feel like you're like performatively laughing harder than you need to. So that was sort of part of the initial experience, but I loved it. I definitely really did like it. And I ended up seeing it. It became like this like normal social thing for teens. Like everyone sort of had to go see it. And so I ended up seeing it like, and yeah, this happens when you're a teenager, because like one friend group will want to go see it and another one. And so you'll go see it twice. I think I ended up seeing it like 4 or 5 times. It only made like 40 million, which is a lot considering it only cost 400,000. But I'm a little surprised it didn't make more, because everyone sort of knows what it is and everyone knows some lines from it. And it seems like, and I think everyone sort of did ultimately see it. I think the home like video.
Yeah, that was like prime DVD era too. So I think it had a second life on DVD.
Yeah, I think the sales were really, really good. I think that I think I heard the number 130 million in DVD sales. I don't know how that compares to like other stuff. A critique I remember at the time, and I still see this a little bit online, not as much, but at the time there was this, that people would say, oh, it's not about anything, or oh, there's no plot. Like, but that's not true. Like, it's got as much plot as almost any other movie. What would you guys say it's about, or what is the plot?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts here, because I get it, because it's a very small scale movie, but I think it is about some things, and it's also as I was thinking through it, I'm like, I guess Uncle Rico is the villain, right? And,
yes,
and
yeah.
like there is like an arc, almost like a hero's journey for Napoleon, and it is there, kind of just a very traditional story, but yeah, you're right in that on a surface level viewing, it's literally just like a guy going to high school, like not much there,
Well, I would say it's about stuff, and it's got a story. It's got like a plot. I might push back on the hero's journey idea, because one thing that's strange about this movie, I think, is that Napoleon never really changes. He doesn't seem to experience any growth. He is sort of like, he just goes, he cuts through the world. And I don't know. I mean, there's times in the movie where he lies a lot, right? One of his things is like pathological lying about like hunting in Alaska.
Which is like a type of guy.
Yeah, everyone knew that kid that did that stuff. Claimed to have, all these special experiences or skills. He's all about skills. So like he's lying he does seem to, I guess he stops lying toward the end of the movie as much.
Well, yeah, he kind of has this like defensive, like, I don't need anyone kind of, because he is like this nerd guy, right? He's kind of like adopted, like, oh, well, I'm actually a secret ninja that has like a girlfriend in a different state. But then like he ends up kind of making these real connections and actually like putting effort into his real life with like learning to dance, etc.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying kind of by hero's journey. He kind of like comes out of it like realizing he actually needs to connect with people in his reality as opposed to kind of living in this fantasy.
I agree with all that. I think there is a lot of story. Like I remember thinking this time, like sort of about the plot with the dance and like the sort of triangle with Pedro and Deb and Napoleon, and then thinking like, oh, and there's this whole school president thing. And then there's all these like tertiary plots with Kip and his girlfriend and stuff that happens with Rico. But I kind of think like, I don't know, on the one hand, you could I think if like someone who wrote screenwriting books was talking about like the conflict that's introduced, they would say like, you shouldn't just have Rico lie to Deb and say that Napoleon was, critical of her. He should actually do that so that it has to spur growth or whatever. Because I agree with what you said, Granite, that I don't think we see that much character development from him. But my spin on that is just that like, it's about kids. So if his character development is minimal, that's okay because he wasn't that bad to begin with. And also, I think the reason people might say that there's no plot is just because the movie is so cozy that you're just enjoying the atmosphere. So it's much more a function of that what you're watching and being entertained by is sort of unrelated to the story. But there is a story going on. It's just that what's enjoyable about the movie is hanging out in the very weird, very particular world that's created. So like your attention can be drawn away from the plot, but there is a plot.
Yeah. And I think, Fraser, you mentioned Uncle Rico as a villain, which in my recent rewatch, I felt that more than I remembered in the past. And it's pretty... It's pretty overt. I guess I forgot. I watched this somewhat regularly, but I haven't seen it for a few years. I guess I forgot about how he was coming across like a sexual predator or something.
Yeah, that definitely stood out more in this watch.
Yeah, and then although he's not necessarily, he's more of just
he's more of a hustler guy.
Yeah, he's trying to get paid, but he's kind of the villain, but I guess a more classic villain who then they actually get defeated is Dawn, the big cool guy Dawn, and Summer Wheatley, Hilary Duff's older sister. So because at the end of the movie they lose the election,
right?
And they are never cool to anyone really. So they are kind of one-dimensional bad guys pretty much the whole movie, I think.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people like, is his name Don, the blonde
Don,
guy?
yeah. Yeah.
But
people like him?
Well, like right-wing Twitter people like him.
A lot of people they probably behave like him, yeah. Or they'll post a picture of a guy that looks like him and be like, we got to return with a V to behaving like Don.
Year old in high school.
Well, yeah, he has a Jake Busey thing going on that I find very evocative. But I I think it's a strength of the movie that, because I think this is also appropriate for a movie about teens, that like the villains are a little bit low stakes.
Well, the whole movie is low stakes, right? Like it's almost like, let's take like just a classic story of, whatever, but make it as like low stakes and low action as possible. Like almost, and I think that's almost the point of the movie. Like if it has a point, is like, and the other thing I was going to say is it kind of lives in more so than like having an epic story. It lives in like these moments and these ideas that it shows that really like haven't been shown in other media as much, I feel like.
For me, if I had to bring it to like one idea, it's about like outsiders and weirdos who like solve their loneliness problem. Like the beginning of the movie, the first shot we see of Napoleon, he's standing alone waiting in front of his house for the bus. We see him at school playing tetherball alone. And then at the end of the movie, he's playing tetherball with Deb. And then like Kip gets his girlfriend. Rico's wife or girlfriend returns, I guess. And Pedro, I guess, was never. He was kind of. He gets to the school alone, and then he becomes the president, which is sort of like a. I don't know what the commentary there is on immigration, but that's, I guess, if I had to sum it up, it's about like people not being lonely anymore.
Yeah, and I also think like to a certain extent it's about Napoleon and his character, and I do feel like it is a type of guy, and it gets heavily explored. I'll say it now. This is one of my other takes. This is take number 2. To me, this has a lot of the DNA of Rushmore. And Napoleon is kind of like the R-slur version of the character in
Max. What's his name?
Max in Rushmore. Yeah, because he whereas he's kind of like charming and a word cell. Napoleon, despite his pursuing of skills, has almost no ability, like natural gifts in any way, other than being tall. But
what do we put Napoleon's IQ at? What are we thinking?
Well, this is an interesting question because I think he shows some. This is not really a dynamic that the movie explores, but I think between the dancing and I don't know, the tetherball, like there might be some high level shape rotator stuff going on. And so if he had a very skewed SAT, low verbal, high quant, that would not surprise me.
Yeah, like he's not like actually disabled in any way, but he's just not like, he's not slick in any way. And so
no, and it's such an interesting performance because some of the tics are really bizarre and it all works, but it struck me this time how much he has his eyes virtually closed for most of this movie, and he has these extended heavy sighs that he's seemingly it's almost like some of the mannerisms are like a very old man but applied to a teenager for comedic effect, and it all works. But I get what you're saying, Cool Fraser, that there is this type of guy in terms of an uncool high schooler who boasts about experiences they probably haven't had and maybe gets into karate or things like that. But there's also things about this character that are unlike any real person I've ever met in the world.
For sure. Although I think if you spent any time in the places where this is supposedly taking place, this is like a very common guy. Like,
sure. That's one of the things I wanted to say about the whole New England thing is, like, to me, these were all these characters, Uncle Rico, Kip, Napoleon, Pedro, they were bizarro versions of archetypes that might be in
townies
my
that you knew.
in my hometown. And I wondered at the time, like, is this just a sort of fantastical creation of the filmmaker, or are there places out west that I'm unfamiliar with where this would be, where people would recognize these characters? Because I did not recognize them.
Well, that's the funny thing, is to a certain extent, like, some of the quirks of the movies are literally just like what those places were like at that time. Especially like the fact that like a lot of people are like, when does this take place? You know, they're like, is this in the 80s? But like literally all of that, including like hairstyles and like styles of dressing and just how it looks, like that's just what kind of the Wasatch Front looked like in the early 2000s.
Yeah, like before everyone was online, like I don't know if it's like this anymore. People, maybe some Idaho people can leave some comments, but when I went to the like the burger place that they have in the movie, I went there in like 2011.
That looked cozy, by the way.
It's a good spot. It's good. Like the type of burgers that they make in like rural Utah and Idaho. I mean, probably all around the West, or I don't know if they're unique to there, but the burgers tend to be pretty good. Like those places are good. But I went that place, and this was like 2011, and I remember seeing this goth kid, and I remember back then seeing lots of goth kids in small towns, and feeling like my like big suburban school had sort of gotten that out of its system in like 99 or something. Like,
yes,
but they were still like doing the goth thing or something. I mean, it's like goth is back. It's a different thing now. But anyway, like I just remember they'd always get sort of like fashions and trends. They would adopt
20
them.
years behind, 10 to 20 years behind. I
doubt it's like this anymore though, because I know that
it's
at
less
least
so. Yeah.
Yeah, with TikTok.
Although I did notice it. I used to sell glasses, and it was similar with glasses trends. Like, you know, like when LMFAO was big, everybody wanted big, chunky plastic glasses. You know, and kids were like still doing that in Utah, like for a while.
That's funny to imagine LMFAO inspiring your glasses purchase.
Hey, it was a thing. No, yeah, I'm kind of somewhat of a rootless cosmopolitan myself, and moved around a lot. So I spent some time in like California, and then I spent some time like out east, and then I ended up living in Utah for a bit. And I remember just being like, why are these people like dressed like this? And like girls at my school would have like those like 80s peacock bangs, you know, that like curl up, which is featured in this movie as well, like that style. And I was like, this is just like out of time.
Yeah. Also, when this came out, 2004, I remember 80s retroism was really, I don't know if retroism is a word, but like 80s retro stuff was really big. Like, it was kind of baked into like the indie rock scene and stuff. A lot of kids would wear various 80s things, and there was like dance clubs that would do 80s nights, and they were very popular. I remember that being something of the era as well.
Sure, but certain aspects of it hadn't come back, like puffy sleeves and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm referencing was like very intentional, whereas what you're referencing was people just not aware that.
No, but again, I'll just add in, and this is you know, the perspective of an uncool New Englander. But when I saw it in college, I did not know. Like, had someone asked me, "Is this how people are dressing and acting in like, I don't know, the upper Midwest or something, or is this just a very cool aesthetic vision of the director that's somewhat plugged into trends that are coming back around?" I might have guessed the second thing, because to me it wasn't. Again, I didn't think it was like real people and subcultures being presented. I thought it was a totally unique imaginary thing from the director's mind. You know, eventually I learned a little bit more about the background and stuff, but you know, people did straight up, like college kids and stuff, like certain of the fashion things presented in this movie like became memes.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the Midwest thing. I put out a tweet a couple weeks ago asking people like what are the best Midwest movies, and I think Fargo was the main and the number one answer, which is a correct answer and a good answer. But I think like number 2 was Napoleon Dynamite, and to someone from the Mountain West, like I never thought of myself as like a Midwestern or anything. So I pointed that out, but I thought it was interesting how many people think of like sort of claim Napoleon Dynamite as like, cause I got a lot of responses. People are like, oh, I'm from Nebraska and these are people like me. Like these are like my people. These are my town people. So I thought that was interesting that.
Yeah, Mountain West was the term I was reaching for. I don't know why I said Upper Midwest, but yes, these are you can see that jerks from the coast like fail to make these distinctions, and like they're not even really clear in my mind now. But I do, yeah, I think it's. I think had I known more at the time, I would have seen more Mountain West than Midwest in the movie. But I guess part of what you're saying is that some of the people from the Midwest still identified with it.
They claim Napoleon. They think of Napoleon as theirs, and they don't even seem to. They didn't remember that it's Idaho, or that I guess they think Idaho is the Midwest or something. I don't know. But.
Yeah, and Kansas is mentioned a bunch as a place he used to live and where his fake girlfriend is from. So.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah. Although I have a feeling a lot of our Mountain West listeners are yelling at their podcast device right now, being like, it's not that bad. And so to be clear, it is exaggerated, right? But like some of like the kids in the school and stuff, like the background characters, I'm like, I doubt they even had a wardrobe for those guys.
No, I don't think they did. And that's just like the Preston High School class of 03 or whatever. That's just who that is. It's just basically the whole town is in the movie.
Well, yeah, one of the things that's genius about the movie, I don't mean to take us on a digression here, but I think one thing that teen movies do to up drama is they'll try to actually make like cool kids in a high school sort of glamorous or culturally sophisticated in a way that reads to adults. And one of the things I love about this movie is that even the cool kids are sort of very silly, like from an adult perspective. And that makes it fun that, like, I guess it's back to the low stakes thing we were talking about, but it's very funny that sort of in the universe, as an adult watching it, it's like both Dawn and Hilary Duff's sister and Napoleon, they're all sort of ridiculous, silly small town characters, but they have sort of a rigid social hierarchy within their own bizarre universe. And that's like a fun thing to observe.
Yeah, like the Hilary Duff sister is just the checkout girl and like not glamorous at all, just like a white trash checkout girl, but she's the top dog at the school.
Yeah, it reminded me, watching it again yesterday, it brought me back to, I remember there was I don't know if it was Made or some other MTV show, but there was an MTV documentary show that was set in such a small town that the quarterback of the high school football team was like 5'8" and clearly sort of objectively not that athletic. But in his mind, he was Tom Brady, and like all the girls at his school loved him. So it's just very fun to watch because it was sort of, as the observer, like this is not, a level of talent or skill that is going to sort of register outside of whatever 250 person town that this is set in. But like for the time being, he's he's the king on Main Street, and that's there's a similar thing going on in Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah. So here is Napoleon Dynamite. Is it still funny, and is it still funny in the same ways?
I think it's still funny. There's a bunch of moments. I should have written them all down, but there's a bunch of moments in the movie that make me laugh out loud, and is a form of humor I've come to associate with this director, like in Nacho Libre and Gentlemen Broncos as well. Or this, I guess it's a pair of directors, a husband and wife. But like a moment that made me laugh out loud I know it did the first time I saw it, and it did yesterday rewatching it, is when the old farmer is fumbling with his gun to kill the cow, and the school bus drives by, and all the little kids scream, and Napoleon is sort of shocked as well. Like there's a number of sort of non sequiturs like that break up the movie, and I think several of those still made me laugh. I think some of the lines are no longer funny only because they've been so beaten to death by culture, but there's still a lot of
I didn't find just give me your tots that funny, although I do like that he kicks his pocket after he says he can't have them. But yeah, I do think it's funny in different ways, although maybe like you said, just those quotes don't hit like they used to. Like just wearing a Vote for Pedro shirt is not the funniest thing you could ever do now, you know.
It's definitely a victim of its own success, because I think it spawned a whole wave of like quirky weirdo humor.
Yeah, like irony, random humor of the mid to late 2000s. That
but I think what did strike me yesterday, and this is a movie that I've probably seen less than 10 times, so like it may not wear out its welcome with me like it may with people who've seen it more, but I think that irony humor, like bizarre, quirky humor, I think it works a lot better when the fundamental medium of the movie is totally wholesome, because you understand why that is the type of humor they're going for. And I think a lot of the shows or movies that copied this style of humor were sort of jamming it into a setting that was still cynical or dark or, I don't know, inappropriate in some way. And that's far less charming. So I think part of the reason it's still funny is because it's like a uniquely innocent movie, and you know that they're creating all these bizarre moments because that's the main trick they're going to for humor. And I think that remains charming. Though, like I said, this hasn't been in a regular rotation for me for several years, so it also seemed sort of fresh.
And I said earlier, this is a lot about like moments, and I feel like like a lot of this is almost just set up for these moments to happen. And a lot of the humor for me in this movie comes from just like some of the little stuff. Like, I don't know, we mentioned, him just lying for no reason about something, or like the bully. We like the bully, and he's like grabs the kid's neck and just kind of is pushing him up and down, like not really punching him, which is like,
I love that move.
That's very real, because like bullies didn't necessarily like punch you in the nose, they'd like kind of push you or like shake your head maybe.
One of the things that is even funnier to me, I think I noticed this at the time, but the facial expressions, like there's the guy he's selling the Tupperware to, and he's trying to like bend it or break it, and his lips are curling up, and then his wife looks at him deeply disgusted that he couldn't do it.
She got the ick.
That's another moment that made me laugh again, is when Kip runs over the bowl and it shatters into a million pieces, and he says, "Darn it," and just drives off.
I still think that's so funny. A lot of Napoleon's little like, where he's in awkward social situations, he'll like pause for a second and then quickly shove food in his mouth, or quickly drink a Gatorade or something. And he's really doing like he deserves kind of all the John Heder, that is. He deserves all the like praise, I guess, or whatever he gets for all the notoriety he got from that role, because he really put together something very, very memorable and I guess compelling in just its strangeness.
Yeah, it's just very physical role. It's almost like he could have been in like a silent film, or like you know what I mean. Like like it's almost like a slapstick Three Stooges type role, but it's not just that, but like very physical.
And I know that like the idea of Napoleon Dynamite was he's a composite of like, you know, of like John Heder and his brothers and Jared Hess and his brothers and like people from Preston, Idaho that they knew and stuff like that. Like, I know it's like kind of a composite of all these like weird traits bundled into one guy, but that's a good, they found good inspiration. They like put together the right parts.
Yeah, I'm remembering now too his monologue at the beginning about the Loch Ness monster is very good.
And you know, there's this one line, like, you know, when Deb comes to the door and Kip in the background says, "Your mom goes to college," and I think I thought that was funny at the time, just as like a "your mom" joke or something. But this time I found myself laughing. I'm not even sure why. Like I'm kind of thinking like that was such a dumb joke, but I'm like laughing that they decided to do that. Like, I don't know what it is exactly, but
well, like Kip is like in the universe of the movie, Kip is like this capable, you know, guy, whereas Napoleon is the screw up. But then like Kip himself is like pathetic in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's funny in that way where it's like, you know, he thinks he's really owning Napoleon, but it's like not an own at all.
Mm-hmm.
Although one of my takes on Kip is he is the way to show someone as pathetic in the early 2000s was that they would chat to people online and meet a girlfriend through a dating app. That's the most pathetic thing you could have done.
If the movie was made today, Kip would be a podcaster.
I like when Uncle Rico is sitting down with them and he's like, you're paying by the minute for this? You're paying by the minute? and he's like, yeah, sometimes grandma gets real mad. And he's like, I'd throw you out the window.
And I like the dynamic when, I guess it's for their business, but Rico sort of decides Kip is in the inner circle and they're talking about their sales work or whatever, and Napoleon does something and they're like, let's go somewhere more private.
Yeah, and they go bowling. I get a business meeting. We touched on this a minute ago about like the things that came after this. So how would you guys kind of describe the movie's legacy? Was there, I guess, and I'm particularly interested in the downside. Like, was there negative things that came from this? Were there people in real life who were trying too hard to be? You remember being random? People were really into random.
Yeah, this is very like, you know, the random girl that the quirked up chungus, you know.
Yeah. There was more girls like this back then. There were kind of girls seemed to like this movie quite a lot.
Yeah, like a girl who liked Napoleon Dynamite would like corner you, start quoting this movie at you.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, I mean, but there was a lot of guys too, I think, who felt like emboldened by this, like who thought they could.
You know what's a direct line is American Dwight from The Office. You know, he's
yes,
like,
that's a very good point.
He kind of picked up the mantle of the Napoleon Dynamite character.
You know, I think and that I think premiered in the U.S. I think in 2005, so right after this.
Yeah,
I think that was a kind of a common comparison at immediately in the beginning. And then Dwight became so big that he became kind of his own thing. But initially, I do recall people making that comparison.
Yeah, in terms of the negative effects of the movie and sort of girls cornering you and talking about Napoleon Dynamite, I think as a different kind of eccentric weirdo, this was frustrating because, you know, I will tell jokes that other people don't understand, and then there was a period of time where they were like, oh, you're so random, you're doing that thing. And I was like, no, these are just inscrutable references. Like, I am stupid and not funny, but in a different way. Like, I'm not trying to be, but it was sort of like everything eccentric got funneled towards certain types of widespread memes of humor. And I definitely felt like whatever was going on in this movie that I liked, it was not it was not my personal humor. And so sometimes, I think it really did have like an outrageously large cultural impact. Especially given that it was geared for teens, but my experience was that it had a big impact on the jokes and even some fashion stuff for people a bit older than that.
Oh, on the fashion thing, no, I don't claim to be. I was not like I was not at the forefront of this or anything, but I was one of those guys that liked thrift store T-shirts a lot, and it was. In retrospect, it was probably like an obnoxious behavior to people around me, but I like to go find like a funny shirt and I'd wear it, and people would be like, "Dang, dude, like, can't believe you wore that." And it's just like some family reunion shirt or something like that.
In 8th grade, I was known as Charlie Tuna because I had Charlie the Tuna shirt, and I would wear it quite often.
This was also the era when like all these brand shirts. I remember kids had like cereal shirts and stuff like that. But like Napoleon has this cool shirt. I don't remember what it is.
He's got a Rick's College shirt.
He's got a Rick's College shirt, but he's got like the shirt with I think it's like a helicopter on it. It looks Japanese or something.
Well, and he has the Wolves shirt that like a different version of was repurposed for the Zach Galifianakis character in The Hangover.
There's another inspiration.
Yeah, so like the first wave of that, and that I think of as like it's sort of a Southwest vintage thing of like the Native American inspired clothes where it'd be like tie dye and an animal, sometimes with, a headdress or something. But yeah, I think that first appeared in a major way in Napoleon Dynamite, and then The Hangover sort of resuscitated it. But
yeah, I had a really good collection of shirts. I had stuff like 1970s country music tour t-shirts, and like NASCAR was not big at all where I lived. I had like NASCAR shirts.
For the Zoomers listening, in the early 2000s, guys at your school would give you high fives if you wore a cool shirt.
Yeah, it was like a thing. You could be a guy that had t-shirts, and I'm not like it's not cool. It was not cool, but it was. There was some notoriety, and some guys did think it was cool. But then this movie. I feel like this movie plus, the bigger factor was like eBay and stuff, but this movie kind of ruined like thrift stores. And again, I was not like the guy who invented shopping at thrift stores, but there was not as many guys. And there was a lot less competition back then. And then this movie and other things like Juno and stuff like that, like all of a sudden everyone wanted to, wear old t-shirts.
Clothing shops were big.
Yeah. Kind of like you couldn't find the cool stuff anymore.
Yeah, I'm now imagining that there's some spectrum where Napoleon Dynamite is the far left, Max Fisher from Rushmore is in the middle, and then Michael Cera from Juno is at the far right. It's like the most humorless and neurotic version of this guy.
Let's talk about performances in the movie. And I'm going to go first, and I think I don't think this whole thing works if they don't have someone really, really, really good in the Uncle Rico role.
Yeah.
And I think they got him. John, I think it's John Grice. And I think as I understand it, he was pretty much about to give up on acting, and some sort of dumb luck, Jared Hess saw a clip that he was in from something else or something, and was just like, hey, that guy would be good. And they offered it to him, and his manager said, this is stupid, don't do it. But he's reading the script, and he thought it was really funny. And he particularly noted how there was no swear words in it. He thought that was really weird, but kind of interesting, how they had to resort to all these creative, euphemistic swear words. And so he takes the role, and it totally reignites his career. He's not a big star or anything, but I think he was in Taken. I remember he's in Taken. He was in the recent one of the recent seasons of White Lotus. He gets around. He does stuff now. But yeah, he was ready to walk away from the business.
A lot of the people cast in this are almost perfect for their role.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think Deb is so good, and
Deb is
it's
perfect.
all facial expressions. She doesn't have very many lines, but she's excellent at conveying emotion just with looks. And so that's another part that could have been sort of a throwaway, but it's a very, very strong performance.
Yeah, and she had actually, she had been a successful child actress. She's in Waterworld. She's the little girl in Waterworld.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. One quick thing I wanted to say about John Grice, though, is that it kind of reminded me of, when they were making the first Star Wars movie, the Episode 4, A New Hope, they got Alec Guinness to be part of it. And he was, at the time and still regarded as, one of these greatest of all time actors. He'd been in, Lawrence of Arabia and stuff like that. And he signed on to be in this like stupid space opera movie, and it gave it all this legitimacy. And like, you can tell when you're watching the first Star Wars, it's like, this guy knows what he's doing. Everyone else is sort of like figuring it out as they go. And that's kind of the same when you're watching Napoleon Dynamite, is like Uncle Rico just kind of feels like he's anchoring the whole thing, and everyone is, just to me, it doesn't feel like it would work without him. I think Napoleon's a great character, but it would have probably felt just more like a series of sketches or something if Rico's not there.
Yeah. Another big actor was Diedrich Bader.
Yeah. And for Bader, I think they initially approached Jack Black, or Jack Black wanted to do it. I don't know why. I don't know why that didn't work out. Maybe they just wanted someone bigger. And then they also, the brother from Everybody Loves Raymond, Brad Garrett, he was offered the role. He turned it down.
There's also, I don't know the timeline on this, but there's real suspicious overlap between the Rex Kwon Do character and the protagonist in The Foot Fist Way. Do you guys know that movie, The Foot Fist Way? Like an early Danny McBride. I think down to like the extremely muscular bleach blonde wife, and I think the same American flag track pants. So that always, I don't even remember which movie came out first, but I always relate those two characters in my mind.
Foot Fist Way was 2 years after.
Okay.
Kip, played by Aaron Ruel, I don't know how he says it, Ruel. I didn't realize he was also with like Hess and Heater at BYU. I didn't realize he was from that group too. I thought he was just a working actor they brought in, but no, he had a ton of like contributions to the movie, like dialogue, and I guess the opening credits with the food, the names written on the food, that was his idea, and I think he even like did some of the artwork. But there's this like dispute between him and this famous like title card guy, I guess, who claims that he did the work. I don't know. It's kind of a weird dispute, but yeah, I think Kip nails. Like, I mean, Cool Fraser's right. Kind of everyone in the key roles is just the exact right person for that role.
Yeah, and like Pedro is like perfect, even though I don't think he's that great of an actor in it necessarily. But like,
well, I was wondering if Pedro could be just like any Mexican guy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He could have been.
Granted, do you think, as the movie historian here, do you think this is the first movie where adult braces are used for comedic effect as like a central characteristic of it? Because I feel like that became a thing, but maybe this is the first movie to feature it.
I bet it's not the first, but also that period of time, like, I feel like people, when they had bad teeth and reached adulthood in the past, they just accepted it. And so this was around the time when adults did start getting braces more often. But yes, it's often used as a way to like communicate. Like, they used to just put like glasses on people, but now they do that as well to communicate that they're a dork. So Jared Hess is this college kid, and he first does a short. Have you guys seen the short, by the way? Like, there's a 9-minute short that Napoleon was based on.
I think I saw it like a long time ago. I haven't watched it recently.
I have not seen it.
It's called Palooka, and Napoleon's name is different. It's Seth in that short, and it's black and white. He's pretty much the exact same character. Mm-hmm. They kind of like split Pedro into two different guys. There's like Pedro and another Mexican guy or something, and but yeah,
the story of when he shaves his head, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then like Seth buys a lotto ticket and wins, and that's like enough. That's how he buys like the suit or something. He buys something. I don't know. Anyway, so Hess makes this short 9-minute movie, and he does that, I think, at some smaller film festival. I think it was in Salt Lake, but it wasn't Sundance. But then people liked that, and they encouraged him to like make a bigger thing. And he got funding again from a guy. I think he got $200K from a guy at BYU who was like I think he was the younger brother of the guy who started 1-800-CONTACTS. So he was like this. He had a bunch of money. He had a bunch of money from his older brother. So he's like, I'll give you $200K. Go make your movie. You've got talent. I want to see what you can do. And they make this movie. Like, he's a college student. He directs a movie. They get a free camera as like a grant award from Panasonic, or I think Panavision or Panasonic, one of the two. And so it's filmed. Everything was filmed on film, I guess, at this point, pretty much.
Yeah.
But they film it on film. It looks really good, but like, I don't know. I guess I'm just looking for like comment on like how did Hess do this, but just sort of like figuring out as he went.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like that, like technically competent in any way. It's not incompetent by any means, but like, I don't know. But to a certain extent, also, like, for those unaware, they're Latter-day Saints, and John Heder and Hess served missions. Heder to Japan, and Hess went to Mexico. And
Hess, I think Hess was
something
Illinois.
Like,
or something.
I thought he did Spanish speaking.
It might be Spanish, but I know that I can say why I know this in a second.
Well, because I thought that this was like a story from his mission.
The name. So okay, there's a weird thing.
The shaving the head because you got too hot.
Oh, that might have been from someone's mission or something. But just the name of the movie, Napoleon Dynamite, is a alias that Elvis Costello used at one point in his career. I don't know if he released music under that name or he just used that name, in some context. But Hess was a missionary in Illinois. He meets a guy who claims to be named Napoleon Dynamite. And so that's where he learned the name. I'm sure that guy got it from Elvis Costello, but later Hess claims he had no idea Elvis Costello had ever used that name. So, but yeah, he meets this guy with that name and he says, I'm going to make and he writes a note to himself. He's like, I'm going to make a movie and that'll be the title.
That's super interesting. You asked Granite, like, how did he do this for so little money? I think what's very clear on screen is just that he has a vision, like to capture mood and tone and characters. And actually, one of the things I thought, and I was thinking of this when you guys brought up the title cards, is I was sort of thinking about, because probably between when I first saw Napoleon Dynamite and now, I've seen 15 Wes Anderson films. And part of the things I was thinking while I was watching it this time was I was like, oh, this is like if Wes Anderson believed in God, was totally unneurotic, and had never been to New York City. So he had all his like visionary and aesthetic talents, but was like a happy person who, had like a normal family life. And then like Napoleon Dynamite is the movie he would make. And I think Hess's aesthetic sensibility sort of lives on in his subsequent movies. I know they weren't as successful or as sort of mimetically powerful as this one, but I think Gentlemen Broncos, I really love that movie, and I think it's similarly like the colors he's painting with there are pretty similar to the ones used in Napoleon Dynamite, and you can still see that it's a visual language that's pretty specific to this director. So, that's not to say that directors don't get better or that people can't learn things, but I think there was some basic visual talent that this guy just always had and was able to put on screen, basically.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Wes Anderson because watch it, and that was I don't know if it was ever a criticism, but it was something that was noted immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, watching it this time, I was reminded of how much, he centers all these images, these wide landscape shots with a person in the middle.
The POV shots as well, being directly down and stuff.
Lots lots of intentionality around like set dressing and like colors and arrangements, and tons of insert shots, like zoom in on a guy holding a paper, like lots of shots of a drawing or something, which I guess John Heder did most of the drawings in the movie.
The thing is, though, too, I think that having the sort of tonal sensibility of a film be so opposite to a Wes Anderson film, while some of the visual sensibility is shared, I feel like that is more original than it is copying, because like in Wes Anderson films, there seems to be a relationship between the ornate, stylized aesthetics and the miserable quality of the characters. And so I actually think it's not derivative to take a similar visual style, but have the sort of background tone be so opposite. Like, for my money, that sort of makes it, they're not derivative of each other. Like, certainly there are visual similarities, but I think the aesthetics and tone of Wes Anderson films are so closely linked that I really do think this is a different thing. And I wouldn't support the argument of like, oh, he stole some of these techniques from Anderson, because it's maybe they're similar tools, but it's being put to a really, really distinct purpose.
Yeah, I thought as much as I could. It's every other movie kind of in this class where it's about down and out losers, small budget movie about losers from maybe a weird place. Like, they always have something very gross or sinister going on as well. Even if the ultimate like movie, even if the movie's ultimate like story or message is sort of hopeful, there's always some character who got molested or something like that. Like, there's always that element. Like, it is strange that the people who would make this kind of movie, are never like just sort of wholesome Chungus Jared Hess. I don't know what it was. Yeah, it's just unusual.
Well, granted, do you ever feel like this is sort of a take I've been bouncing around, which is like, I think the rest of Western civilization, Europe, views America the way Gentile Americans view Mormons, which is to say, like, they're frustrated by how seemingly naive and optimistic they are, but then also have to sort of concede that they are successful in that naive. Like, what they want to say is sort of, you won't survive in this world like trying to be that clean cut, that wholesome. But then, from the European perspective, like, Americans do very well, dynamic economy, like in control of the world. And then within America, I think that's how we non-Mormons tend to view Mormons, but also, again, like the Mormon contingent is very, successful in economic and family life. So it's like a funny, and I think some Europeans would say about American art, like sort of what you were just saying about this movie, like, where's the darkness, where's the pathos? But, it doesn't have to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's versions of that take that I've definitely encountered. I'm sure Cool Fraser has as well. But yeah, that, I think that's like tracks like to this movie. Like, and I've always found that interesting too. You can just, there are all these like components of a movie that, or a story that people would say, well, the following things need to be there, but you can just leave some of them out and see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I encounter sort of totally, I don't know how to describe it, sweet or wholesome stories, like, certainly in the market, like, if there's too little of anything, there's not a lot of movies like this. There's plenty of stuff that, explores the dark underbelly or whatever. So even if that's not my personal sensibility, I think it's always, it's not bad to have things like this in the entertainment marketplace from my perspective.
Yeah. So an important question about, like, so we talked earlier, it's like, is this a Midwest movie? It's like, well, no, it's a Mountain West movie, but that's kind of the same. But, and we talked a little bit before the episode, but like, Cool Fraser, I'm going to throw it over to you first, but I'm going to pose this question. Like, to what extent and in what ways is this a Mormon movie? And, go from there, I guess.
Yeah. So what it is it's a Mormon setting, but without ever mentioning it. So it's dressed in the culture of, well, more so a Mountain West, or a Wasatchian, as some people say, a Wasatchian culture.
Yeah, no one says that. I never heard.
There's one guy who says it. So, like seeing it as a teen who, I spent a decent few years in Utah growing up. I was like, yes, this is right. But it's never mentioned in the film. They don't go to church. It's dubious as to whether the grandma has raised them LDS. So yeah, it's not and like you said, people from other cultures have kind of adopted it, but the setting is just so Utah, Idaho that it's inescapable.
Well, there's that bonus scene at the end where there's a wedding. That it's really funny. They have the guy Lyle doing the wedding, and when I was watching that, even the tonation of his voice, the way he was saying his lines, I'm like, this is what it sounds like when a local bishop, and for those who aren't aware, a local bishop in an LDS congregation is just a guy. He's just a guy who lives in the neighborhood, but he's like the priest or whatever. But the way he's doing this wedding ceremony, the entire affect is and the little the advice he gives about he says, oh, here's my advice for marriage. If you get in an argument, just walk around the block, get some fresh air. The way everything about it is the way a bishop would marry a couple, and bishops don't actually do very many weddings in the LDS church. So they only do them kind of occasionally, but that is exactly what it would look like when a bishop does a wedding. And that's the advice he would give too.
No, yeah, 100%. It's very,
and that's where they got that guy. They got Lyle from. They knew him from church, right?
And to a certain extent, we kind of mentioned where does he get this artistic perspective? And to a certain extent, it's just him shining a light on this kind of quirky culture that exists, right? To a certain extent, he has this entire kind of unknown portion of the United States to pull from. And to just show all the quirks and weird cultural aspects of it, the egg farm and I don't know, feeding a llama or whatever.
And it's interesting, in the movie you never, like you mentioned, they never go to church, which I'm actually on this rewatch I was a little surprised by. I was thinking how did they not find a way to have at least one scene, and they could have even. They could have even anonymized it, just a sort of generic Christian sort of setting.
Well, and it's almost like they wanted to make sure it wasn't a quote unquote Mormon movie. It almost seems specifically avoiding that.
Yeah, if there must be at least one LDS chapel in Preston, Idaho, that they'd never catch in the background. And then the only religious iconography we see at all is actually is Pedro's Catholic stuff.
Yep.
We see there's actually a nice scene where I think it's when they do the jump on the bike. Mm-hmm. So before it's Napoleon's turn, they zoom in on him. There's Mother Mary and Jesus on each shoulder, and this nice little framing.
Oh, the other Catholic religious thing is he said he thinks it would be nice to have a saint in the school, and he names one of the
protect them
Divino Nino saints to have.
Yeah, and this probably won't surprise you guys, but I think it was probably a decade before I knew this movie had anything to do with Mormons. Yeah. I think it was years and years later I just saw an interview with John Hader where he was just sort of talking about his life and some of the cultural context for the film, and it made a lot of sense, but I had no idea.
So like I say, there's no there's no LDS like images in the movie. Really, they were intentional to leave that out, except for there's the Rick's College T-shirt, which for people who don't know, that was a church. Like I guess the church owned that school, and then it's now like a satellite school for BYU. They film when he buys his suit. They're filming at what's called Desert Industries, which is a thrift store operated by the LDS Church. And then, what's the other, like the kind of all the arts and crafts stuff, like the boondoggles. This is all like very, just like
he
very
mentioned scout camp too, which is not necessarily LDS, but at the time, every young man in the church would have been part of a scout troop.
Yeah, the arts and crafts aesthetic is very LDS. The alternative swearing, that's like a huge LDS thing. Like that seems to have died down. Maybe that's one of those like casualties of the internet. But I'm seeing a lot more people use normal swear words now, which let's go. We got to go back to bodaggit or whatever, or like
I'll study the list and I'll try to integrate those into my Granite Mountain appearances going forward.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other. There's one really funny. This was not intentional, I am certain, but there's also sort of a funny polygamy sort of image in the movie. And again, this was not intentional, I'm sure, but Napoleon takes the girl to the dance and she's wearing like basically a white wedding dress, which is, that's what they would do in a small town, though. That's like the kind of dress you'd wear to a dance in that sort of small town at that time. Now I think the girls just dress like girls everywhere. But the girl Napoleon takes immediately leaves him on the dance floor, and she goes over to Dawn and Summer, and it's Dawn, and it's funny because he's in a white shirt and white pants, which is like the LDS, like that's like what a family would wear if they went. Yeah. And he's standing there with two girls in white wedding dresses, basically. So I thought it was a funny white polygamy moment. But
yeah, tag Nightmare Vision on that one.
Yeah. But that's, I don't know if Cool Fraser, if there's any other like influences you saw there, but obviously the brain trust of the movie and even the financing was all BYU guys. So
it's kind of interesting, and like you mentioned, it's kind of interesting they were able to avoid more of it. Yeah, I don't know. I do you think there's an extent like, there's kind of this there's like an NPR girl who was raised LDS and then like now is like a NPR libtard, and she's like, I used to be homeschooled, it was terrible. Like a lot of like artistic leaning LDS people that make it end up being like they kind of mine it for social clout and curiosity because they're New Englander friends. their coastal elite friends will be like, wow,
don't you put really that poison on me, Cool Fraser.
But do you think it's like an embarrassment that they avoided it, or do you think it was more like we want this appeal to as many people as possible and not make it like, oh, this is the Singles Ward famous LDS movie?
Yeah, I think the actual depending on my mood, this could I might frame this as a critique, but like there's something deeply like impersonal about the movie. Like we never get that like moment where someone sits Napoleon down and has this heart to heart. Like Deb kind of does it at one point, like tells him he's a jerk, or she calls him up or something. But normally a movie like this about a young man who like he's fumbling through the world, there would be a moment where he sits down with like a dad or a trusted confidant or something, and they're like, you know what, Napoleon, like you're a jerk, or like you need to change in the following way. Like it never really I don't know, it never really lets you. It always keeps you at a distance. Like there's always a kind of a weird distance to this movie, and like I say, in some ways I could say that as a bad thing, but ultimately that's just what it is, and it works. So good, interesting choice that they made. So the same thing I think kind of applies to the the Mormon question. Like, I think they just didn't want. Yeah, they just like didn't want that tied into it. Not out of embarrassment or anything. Just they like wanted it to feel. They wanted to capture Preston, but I guess somehow like do it outside of the.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. To a certain extent, this is the best Mormon movie ever made, and in a way, it portrays the culture very lovingly. You know, like it's not just mining it to make fun of it.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, I think from the outside, seeing the movie, enjoying it, and then learning later that lots of Mormon people felt that it captured something authentic about a culture they grew up in, that left a very positive impression with, like, it I can't think of another cultural artifact from another religious community that's similar, and I don't want to call the film propaganda, but I do think if the purpose of the movie was to sort of like give people a good impression of Mormons, I think it was successful in that regard. But I also wanted to ask Granite, do you know, is there any backstory to why they decided to make this character have absent parents and like never addressed that?
No, that's a really good question, but that kind of gives me an opening to. I wanted to clarify a little bit what I was saying a second ago about like there's never like that there's never like a sincerity moment in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's weird because it's not insincere, but it avoids sincerity. Like it's really strange, and along those same lines, like the parents, like you know. Like, they just don't bring it up. Like, but it's just like Kip is 32. They say that, and then Napoleon's in high school, so he's 17, presumably, something like that.
Yeah, Kip 32, so extremely young, whole life ahead of him. Go on.
Yeah, and Napoleon's much younger, and it's like, yeah, where did these two guys come from? And then they have this Uncle Rico, like, again, like I don't know what's. And this like grandma, I don't know. It's all just like very strange. Like
X Games grandma.
X Games, yeah. And they just don't want to.
Although even that, I mean, growing up, a portion of my life in like Utah and some of the not as good neighborhoods as where Granite grew up, there were kids like that who were like raised by their grandma and stuff. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, there's kids like that everywhere. And I know too, before. I'm curious what you guys think about this. Definitely when I knew nothing about the makers of this film or the background, I thought, you know, being from the decadent East Coast, I thought the grandmother was like extremely lesbian coded.
Yeah.
Well, and Rico does say, he's like, there's a lot about your grandma you don't know or something. Like.
Yeah, and then she's with like some busty women at the sand dunes.
Yeah, and she has a shirt. I couldn't catch all it said, but it says the start of the shirt is my ex-husband.
It's I got it. It was it said I got divorced for religious reasons. My husband thought he was a god.
Oh.
Yeah, but yeah, this goes back to what I was saying. Like, and sorry for like repeating this, but it's like for some reason it's kind of like stuck in my mind. But yes, you would think in a movie where he's being raised by his grandma, and I know she's absent for most of the movie, so you know, but you would think there would be one throwaway scene, not throwaway, but one quick scene where it's like, she's like, well, you know, Napoleon, your parents died in that tragic plane accident or something.
Yeah, or they're away for something.
But they would want you to do the right thing. Like they would want you to.
Well, I think that's why they avoided it, right? Because that would kind of ruin the movie if he had like a parental figure to tell him something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting too. Like no one is really investing in his social development.
Like that's why the grandma has to leave, because there's just Uncle Rico who's kind of like thinks he's an idiot and doesn't want to help him in any way.
Yeah. Another thing that the movie does, this is kind of along the same lines, which I think is quite funny, is that like the movie wants to stay very wholesome. I don't know if it might be PG, but the movie wants to stay wholesome, and so they clearly like structure it to imply that like Rico is going around the town like sleeping with all the women he's selling stuff to. But like they never they it's like less than a hint. Like they don't really hint at it, but it's like there. That he's like that he's getting around town. Definitely with the purple lady. Like it's like very much seems like he's sleeping with that lady.
Trish's mom.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand the small town politics of like, I like this Tupperware salesman, so you have to go to the dance with his nephew. Like it seems like she could pursue her relationship with Uncle Rico without making her daughter go to the dance with Napoleon. But
I assume that was just basic like Christian kindness. Like he made the effort to ask you.
Okay.
And you have to say yes, even though he's possibly mentally deficient or something.
No, I think mom was getting serviced by Rico and wanted to do him a favor.
Is that the reading?
That was my reading, but I'm from the fallen world. but I think in terms of its approach to that issue, granted of Rico is sleeping with all these women, I think that is very much in line with like the way a lot of Christian art used to be, or when like Christian pressure groups actually had an influence on Hollywood. Like all these things would still be gestured at. They'd just be handled like the way they are in this movie, which is sort of like adults will get what the dynamics are, but nothing will be, no dots will be connected. And if young people or innocent people are watching, they won't know what the implications are. Yeah,
and there's the principal who, I think the principal's great, by the way. Yeah. He's like the most he's probably got the funniest line in the entire movie, in my opinion, which is like where he's like, what is he? It's like, here in the gem state we have some, I'm not sure how they do it in Mexico, but in the gem state we have something called pride.
And then Pedro is like, we hit face piñatas all the time in Mexico.
Yeah. But at the end of the movie, the principal is off, he's stage left or whatever, like, creepily watching the young girls dance. Mm-hmm. And he's got this look on his face. That might be the funniest like moment of the movie for me at this point in my relationship with the movie. But
that's interesting, because I was so sort of in the wholesome mindset. I thought the read there was just, this guy's lame. He thinks it's a really good
dance,
I think it's both. He's excited. Not that he was a creep, but
he's like this slaps. Like,
yeah.
Like he's like, wow, yeah, like this is good entertainment. Yeah, I actually got both reads watching it. I'm like, you can read it either way, and it's fine. Speaking of creeping out on young women, which GF would you guys have picked in high school of the girls?
So what, Summer Wheatley versus
Trish
versus Deb. Well, here's a funny thing too, is that a lot of the characters are not, and we kind of addressed this earlier, but I was going to ask you guys, like, do you find Napoleon, virtuous or likable or something? I think he's kind of something other than that. But same thing with like Deb. It's like Deb is kind. Mm-hmm. She's not mean, but there's also like a blankness to her.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't seem interesting. That's for sure.
Well, I'm going to push back a little. I think what is interesting about her, a great flourish that they give her, is that she's initially presented as sort of totally boring and blank, inert. She comes to sell the little like trinkets and runs away. But there's a couple moments where she's talking about pictures and how to make someone look good for a picture, where she almost has the kind of aesthetic sense where you're like, oh, this girl will end up at art school or something. So they do give her a couple scenes where when she's like framing, where they sort of give her a little depth of like, oh, she takes her photo job very seriously and has strong opinions about it. And I thought that was an appealing quality. I mean, Trish and Summer are just like not real characters. So if you're going to force me to say which child bride I select, I'm selecting Deb.
If you were young.
Got it.
That Summer Wheatley is goofy she's a funny casting, and she might be a fan of the show. I hope she doesn't hear this though. But it's just like, you're not Hilary Duff. Like, this kind of like, there's something kind of uncanny valley about her on screen, because she just
like
doesn't
an
quite
AI
look
generated Hilary Duff.
Yeah, she just doesn't quite look like her sister. And the movie has a lot of fun with like this idea of like artistic portrayals of people. Like Napoleon's drawing of Trish, is like this kind of grotesque. I spent 3 hours on the upper lip or whatever.
Yeah, shading the upper lip.
Yeah, and when Summer is like dancing, she's dancing in front of a like almost like a North Korean drawing of herself, big painting of her face, but it doesn't look like her. It's like, it's a very poor quality, and that was probably a choice of the movie. They're just like, someone make this and it will look like a student made it, so it doesn't need to be that good. And like, so the movie does play around with this same thing that I'm feeling when I look at Summer Wheatley, where it's like you're just sort of like bizarro Hilary Duff. It's not working for me. So,
but don't you think the movie is? We talked about this a little earlier, but I feel like it was intentional to make both Dawn and Summer be like, you want the king and queen of this small high school to not be that objectively appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess to answer Cool Fraser's, it's a hard, if I was in there in that time and place, there's the social pressure where you would probably think, Trish and Summer are so great, because that's like the social thrust of everyone around you. But yeah, Deb's definitely the better choice.
I would go Trish.
What's your rationale?
I don't have any.
You just like being treated poorly.
Yeah,
I think there's
that like Zoomer meme where they just want to be violently attacked by their significant other or whatever. That's what I'm.
I think there's a certain diabolical logic behind this choice from Cool Fraser. You never want to go for a number 1B.
Yeah. She's got that insecurity. I never I don't want to go to like the manosphere direction on this, but there is there is that thing about someone like Trish where she thinks she is so special. Like, she's just disgusted that Napoleon would find her interesting.
Yeah, you go for the second cutest girl in the room.
That is a tactic. That is a tactic they use. But I guess when I say manosphere, I'm talking about like, the guys who are like kind of upset at women for rejecting them, but then like that. But then they'll point out like that woman's life trajectory is not what she thinks it is, and they kind of capture that. Probably not intentionally, but Trish is, and Summer too. Like Summer just like very gleefully rejects Pedro. She gives him that note, says no with like hearts.
Yeah.
And but they're like, they're these small town girls who think they are awesome, and like they're not. Like outside of their context, they're maybe a little above average or something. But
well, and to go also manosphere, is there any saving of this incel Napoleon Dynamite? How would you fix him?
Degree Studies, I have an answer, but I'll let Degree Studies go first. If he.
Oh man, well, I immediately want to shoot back at you. Is the implication not that him and Deb are kind of getting together at the end?
I think if you had a Napoleon Dynamite that you knew, what advice would you give him?
Well, I think actually advice that stands up and is very positive is it's sort of implied that Deb maybe has a crush on Napoleon throughout the movie. But I do think it's like sound advice to men that Napoleon like transcends concern about what other people at the school think of him and really commits passionately to the dance, and then a girl likes him. Like, I think there is some
display competence in some way.
Display competence and passion, and also just sort of moving beyond the central concern being some sort of status triangulation where you're calculating your every move. Instead, you throw caution to the wind and do something bold. I think that can win the hand of fine young maidens. Still,
you're
maybe
saying be yourself and go up and talk to her.
Yeah, be yourself. Yeah, so I think Napoleon's going to be fine. But Granite, what was your answer?
I don't think there's any future for them. Like they
Granite blackpilling us as usual.
Yeah. They might have like a brief like friendship, and maybe they kiss or something. But as you guys are pointing out, and you like I was saying she's blank, but you guys pointed out, well, there's a little more to her, and I think that's fair. And it's like, yes, she might hang around with him for like one summer, but then like she's gonna catch a glimpse of the bigger world, and she will be off with someone more
Chad.
With alt Chad. But
yes,
the thing they have going for them, and this is real advice for the young kids out there, is that neither Napoleon or Deb really talks. And I think if you can go weeks together saying like one or two sentences, you can stretch out the problems a lot longer.
Yeah, maybe. Deb after graduation is moving to Salt Lake. It's like 2 hours down the road, and she is gonna enroll in the art program.
She's becoming an ex-mo. She's getting on Twitter, and she's gonna expose the whole thing.
Yeah, nowadays Deb would be getting on antidepressants and becoming a they-themer.
Yeah. Okay, I mentioned a second ago, I really like the line that we have a little something called pride, and I've seen a bunch of accusations later about the racist principle in Napoleon Dynamite. But what are some of your other? We've talked about a bunch, but any other quotes you guys particularly like?
Well, I like the Pedro cousins or whatever that are just like cholo gangsters living in that town.
MS-13.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's Guatemalan. He is Mexican, right?
I think so.
Yeah, Pedro. He has a Mexican flag on his bike. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's funny commentary about Pedro being an immigrant and quickly ascending the power hierarchy to become the president of the school.
Yeah,
despite barely speaking English.
I also like in high school. I moved around a lot in school, so I feel like I usually had a friend like Pedro, because I would just pick up on one of the immigrants and be like, "Hey, Quadir, do you want to be my friend?" That was my actual friend.
Quadir?
Yeah, Quadir.
Where is he from?
Malaysia.
We should change that in post to protect Quadir and his family.
Well, I didn't say his last name.
I want to read the quote, Granite, that I already mentioned, the Loch Ness quote.
Yeah, read it.
The teacher goes, "Your current event, Napoleon." He goes, "Last week, Japanese scientists placed explosive detonators at the bottom of Lake Loch Ness to blow Nessie out of the water. Sir Court Godfrey of the Nessie Alliance summoned the help of Scotland's local wizards to cast a protective spell over the lake and its local residents and all those who seek for the peaceful existence of our underwater ally."
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Like, it's kind of an interesting. So Napoleon read that on the internet, right? Like, where else? I mean, maybe there was those.
Well, yeah, like there's a lot of internet there, which people kind of forget. We were pretty online by the early 2000s.
Yeah, and there were those like grocery store tabloid things that would have stories like that, but we never really see Napoleon go online. But Kip's online the whole movie.
Yeah, he says he doesn't have computer hacking skills, so.
Yeah, and a lot of Americans were online at this point, but it was still kind of a fresh thing. I mean, a lot of people still had dial-up and stuff, but faster things were available at this point.
Yeah, and Napoleon does actually have some pretty good neg game in this movie, because I'm remembering now too the milk quote.
Yeah.
Where he says, "I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? You're not. You could be drinking whole if you wanted to." That's pretty powerful, Riz.
Yeah. When I always thought the thing with Uncle Rico, I always thought this phrase was so funny, and I don't know if it's because like Jared Hess was a nerd or something, but Rico says, if coach had put me in fourth quarter, like I'd take state, which is a strange way to phrase. Like I've never heard anyone talk about a team sport saying I'd take state. Like I would have taken state. Like it's always like we, and later he says say we, but that has always made me laugh. They say I'd take state. Like it's funny both because of the like sort of pathetic, backwards looking behavior of like living in the past, but it's also funny because like the word formulation always struck me as so strange.
Yeah, I also thought I don't know if it's an oversight or like an interesting thing, but one thing that's funny in this movie is when Uncle Rico is first filming himself, he really chucks it. Like on the second throw, he does a lame sidearm and it looks goofy. But the first one, I'm like, oh yeah, I could see that guy being like a backup quarterback who should have started. Maybe they would have won state.
Yeah, in an interview, I was reading it, so I couldn't tell if he was joking. But he mentions playing minor league baseball in real life. I don't know if, I don't know if that's a joke or a joke about like Rico or something. But yeah, he brought that up because of the stake throwing scene. He really throws it. It's not someone off camera throwing the stake at Napoleon's face. He really throws it. He's like, I can do this. I used to play baseball, minor leagues or something. So
yeah, this has probably been overdone by culture too. But I remember on first viewing, Kip muttering, "That's what I'm talking about." When Napoleon gets hit is a really good moment.
Yeah, and it's very funny too because he grabs the steak off of Kip's plate. You just imagine like that, like sitting there eating a steak and someone grabs it to throw at someone else.
Also, the steak being well done.
Yeah, the steaks look really awful. I mean, they're buying cheap steaks and they're just I don't know, cooking them. However,
I like that Napoleon keeps complimenting Pedro on his mustache.
Yeah,
and then I don't have a favorite quote, but this time what I noticed was the kind of like the rules of Rex Kwon Do written on the wall. And it says, "I shall respect Rex. I shall never misuse Rex Kwon Do. I shall be a champion of freedom and justice."
Good rules to live by. I'm remembering now too a moment I loved it's sort of a hard cut in the movie and made me guffaw this time is when it just cuts to Napoleon at the desk with 3 bottles of milk and he goes, "The defect with this one is bleach."
Yeah.
That was a good scene.
Which is like a real competition that FFA does. I think so. And then the guy behind him is wearing a jacket that says like something Hess. So I'm guessing it's like Jared's grandpa or uncle or something. I like the Rex Kwon Do advertisement where he's talking about like he's like the strength of a puma or something, like the reflexes of a puma and the wisdom of a man. Oh, and then this one, I had totally forgotten about this line. And I referenced earlier how much like more of like a sex pest Rico is than I maybe realized on previous views, but a very, very funny line. So for such a soft face deserves a soft body. Like that's a really good line. Do you guys like just shred a bunch of cheddar cheese on top of chips and melt them?
That is I feel like that's a very Utah thing too.
Yeah, I think it is. Because I did.
I've done that. And I also even remember the sort of round chips he has. I think that there's certain things in America. I mean, put the cheddar aside for a moment, but I feel like when I was a kid, parents would be embarrassed to buy pre-shredded cheese. They'd be like, "What, you're going to spend an extra $1 just so someone else shreds it for you?" But now it does seem like people have shredded cheese. But I certainly grew up with a shredder and a block.
I was a shredding family, or a shredded cheese family.
Yeah,
You
you
bought it
shred it on the
pre-shredded?
half
Shredded.
pipe and you shred it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So wait, you're telling me, you're giving me a hard time about being from East Bend, Salt Lake, but you guys bought shredded cheese.
We had shredded cheese and name brand cereal. All the kids, when we lived in Utah, the kids would come over to our house to eat the name brand cereal.
Oh, you didn't buy like was it Western
bag of
Family?
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a kid who we'd just find in our closet, in our pantry, eating Doritos and name brand cereal.
Yeah, it's cool when families would buy like tons of weird snacks.
I on cheese, semi-related story. We had the missionaries over for dinner one day, which is something you do, and there was a guy who was brand new, and he was kind of like a chubby kid from Utah, and he's like, I made like really nice, like basically like at home Chipotle where you could like put together your own burrito, like. I grilled up some meats. It was really fancy style. And he's like, you know what I like? I call it cheese chips. I just melt piles of shredded cheese until they get like nuked and become like stale or whatever. And then I eat those.
You should tell them, wait till the Mexicans hear about this. Cheese chips.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who do common things and think they made it up.
But just cheese, no chips.
I like when they put an egg in the orange juice.
Oh yeah,
that's like I don't know. Isn't that like a Ray Peat thing? That just seems like something like a guy named like Egg Bra would do on Twitter and be like, I invented this thing where you put an egg in orange juice. It's called a juicy egg.
Yeah, there are definitely. I mean, eggs and OJ are two of the big Pete foods, so I'm sure someone has combined them.
Yeah, so. I feel like there's a guy online like
carrots on chips.
There's a guy online claiming that he did that, but actually the farmers in Idaho have been doing that for way longer. I actually had to look this up. I was actually curious about the Starla character. I actually thought she might have been like a trans person or something, but no, it's a real woman bodybuilder. But
oh wait, that's a woman.
It is. Yeah, it's just a bodybuilder.
They don't build them like they used to.
I'm not trying to insult anyone, but when there's a later scene where it's real close on her face, it just totally looks like a man in a wig.
Well, she's probably
and her
on
voice
testosterone, so she's would be considered trans today.
Yeah, I mean, she was a competitive bodybuilder. I think she's vaguely or fairly well known outside this movie. Uncle Rico is a early case of he's a van life influencer.
Yeah. That van, I actually thought that when I saw the van. I'm like, man, that van would be so expensive now.
Well, like people doing exactly what he was doing get rich now. Just living in a van and filming it. Filming themselves like do tricks in front of their van. And that van, by the way, was just like some local Preston guy that they found, and they asked him if they could use his van, and he said yes.
Yeah, that van did look cool.
All right, so we talked about Nacho Libre, and I think Gentleman Broncos came up, but any other Hess? So for me, I don't feel like any other Hess film has really even scratched Napoleon Dynamite in terms of just like overall delivery of a movie. But I'm curious.
I'm with you on that, although I do know a lot of people prefer Nacho Libre,
and Nacho Libre it made twice as much money at the box office, or more than twice as much. Not much bigger budget, but.
I kind of like all three, to be honest. I mean, you get such a it's such a unique thing when you're introduced to the Napoleon Dynamite aesthetic, and then so when aspects of it reappear in the later two movies, it's not as unique an experience. But Nacho Libre, I do think with the Jack Black character in Nacho Libre, they captured something really interesting, and some of the lines are so funny, and like the way they conceived the accent, it's just like a really silly film. So yeah, that one, I do think Napoleon Dynamite is the best film, but Nacho Libre has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, he also did some of the TV series Last Man on Earth, which I really liked. I recommend it. It's Will Forte. Hess just directed like 2 of the episodes, I think.
He did Masterminds, which was bizarre.
Yeah, that's like a bank robbery thing. I've never even seen this Don Verdeen movie, but
Masterminds is Zach Galifianakis and Kristen Wiig, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I tried to watch that and didn't make it.
Yeah, that's about it for him. I mean, he directed a music video for the Postal Service, the "We Will Become Silhouettes" video.
And looks like he just released a animated Netflix movie.
He'll be joining the $1 billion club soon. He's doing the what's it called, Minecraft movie.
Right.
That will be, I assume, that will be a big hit, like Super Mario.
And is his wife credited on all these movies or just certain ones?
I don't know if she works on every. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if she joins him for every single thing, but yeah, they work together a lot.
Could you guys marry a lady named Jerusha?
That's kind of like, I don't think I know anyone named Jerusha, but that's also sort of a LDS sort of name that you might encounter.
I feel like I'm cooler with the name than letting my wife work on my movies.
Yeah.
She's got shorter hair than him, so it's could be an interesting
one of those
situations. Yeah, okay, this is a weird thing that potentially needs to get cut. But sometimes I see Mormon couples where if I didn't know they were Mormon, they would be like the most NPR granola living in Brooklyn people, and that's how I feel of the pictures of the two of them.
Is this in the East Coast, though?
Yeah, it's just like two people in flannel, both with short hair, both skinny.
Well, there's
it's like, these people,
the diaspora kind of go, like, they try to blend in, and sometimes they go a little too hard. So they're like, we have to look like libtards to fit in here, I feel like.
Well, and a lot of them under 40 now are libtards.
Well, yeah.
Like, there is a great there's a great scourge amongst our people. So I am not cutting this out. I know exactly what you mean, and yes, there's like
I see him too.
It's and I think, I mean, I don't want to speculate on them too much, but I would assume they're kind of like of that ilk.
It's kind of that millennial couple meme with the like Shrek guys or whatever.
Yeah.
What is it?
One thing I want to comment on is I think they had pretty limited budget for music, but I think they made very good choices.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the music.
There's the songs they like bought, like licensed, like they opened the movie with that White Stripes song. That was, and the time, that was like a really nice touch. So it's like you're sitting down, you're like some kid who thinks of himself as kind of cool or whatever. Like, oh yeah, they got this cool White Stripes song. That's I know I'm in for some quirky sort of fun. And then the movie ends on that song. I think it's called Music for a Found Harmonium. That's a great sequence where like Napoleon's walking through the town and like seeing all of his good deeds. All of his actions are like bearing fruit, and that's a good scene. But yeah, good use of music. And then the score, all these like strange, like, I don't even know exactly how they're making all the noises, but they're very distinct to Napoleon Dynamite.
Kind of like synth.
Yeah. I'll have to like edit this, but should we talk about the last thing? Should we talk about the nation?
Yes.
I don't know. Do you guys know like what's going on in this picture?
Yeah.
This segment available on the Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream.
Let's leave it. Let's cut it off there, I guess. Thanks a ton for joining, guys. And if people are still here, don't forget to sign up for the Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream for exclusive content. Any final words, guys?
Just Zazie Beats.
Oh yeah. What would she play in Napoleon Dynamite?
She'd probably be Trish.
Yeah, I could see her being a mean girl.
Yeah.
Playing a mean girl. The shading on the upper lip might take even longer.
Yeah. And in the new remake, Kip's girlfriend would be revealed to be a transsexual.
Yeah, Napoleon's gonna need the 24 Crayola pack that Uncle Rick won't buy him. He's gonna.
Speaking of Kip's girlfriend, I think like, a casual watch of the movie I think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's they might call this some sort of like black fetishism or like joking. It used to be like pretty common to just like have a black person in something, and that was funny, just like that it was a black person.
Uh-huh.
And they're kind of doing that, but LaFonda's like a really charming character.
Yeah.
Like, she is on screen. She has very few lines, but she's very sweet to Napoleon. And she's actually like one of the only people in the movie who like talks to him just like encouragingly. She's like, here's this tape, like check it out. My cousin made it. Like if you like dancing. Yeah, she's good. I like LaFonda.
Yeah, and in the end credit scene, her Tariq Nasheed styled brothers, not brothers, but brothers at the wedding are shaking their heads and their hands as she says yes.
I also, no one follow up and ask me how I know this, but I sort of think like the, let's put it this way, like the financially stable but boring white man and the black girl who's tired of the hood, like that's a tried and true pairing from real life. So, you have
a lot of experience with that?
No, I don't qualify. I'm not financially stable, but I observe my surroundings.
Well, if people sign up for the Premium XL Prestige Sigma bonus stream, I have already told my contributors that they'll be getting a cut. So
there's a like an Instagram meme, I think, of like white guys that marry black girls and like how they look better after they marry black girls. And like, I thought of that when Kip like was wearing a do-rag and like was looking cool.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. It's like, you like this guy because he's an accountant, and now you make him dress like somebody who couldn't get an accounting job. We're working at cross purposes, but I still believe in those two crazy kids.
Yeah. Well, let's make degree studies financially stable in 2024.
So he can get his black GF.
Yeah. Let's cut it off there. But thanks for going along on the ride with us, everyone. And go watch Napoleon Dynamite.